In today's world, governments can outsource their work to the private sector at many points. There is a close relationship between the state and the private sector in many areas such as transportation services, education services, health services. The interesting part is that the state tries to implement an influence-oriented policy by using mercenary groups. For years, the US has tried to make gains in the Middle East by using mercenary groups. There was another state that wanted to apply this tactic but came too late: Russia. The cold winds and tense international environment between the US and the USSR during the Cold War have given way to more normal conditions today. The developments in military technology of the period actually laid the foundation for the big companies that have survived to the present day. Using mercenaries can be a logical approach, especially in regions outside one's own territory. Considering these possibilities, Russia decided to use the Wagner mercenary group on the battlefield for the first time in 2014. During the war that Russia illegally annexed Crimea, pro-Russian separatist forces began to gather under the Wagner umbrella. These mercenaries, who were not directly attached to the Russian army, later became Wagner's most effective force. So what happened and why did Wagner, who fought for the Russian army, disappear today? Wagner's story actually contains a great lesson. Wagner fought for Russia for years, but when he fell out with the Moscow administration, he made moves that led to his downfall. The facts kept secret and the suspicious death of Wagner's leader Prigozhin. In Russia, it is not possible to make amends for mistakes. Every soldier or bureaucrat who makes a mistake or is suspended mysteriously disappears or falls out of a high-rise window. Now, if you are ready, let us examine Wagner's story in his journey to collapse. It is actually possible to make many definitions about Wagner. Some describe them as a paramilitary organization, others as Putin's private army. In the simplest terms, we can call it a mercenary company based in Russia. Founded in 2014, Wagner is founded by Yevgeny Prigozhin. The previous job of Prigozhin, who founded Wagner, is quite remarkable. Prigozhin, the founder of Wagner, was previously Vladimir Putin's private chef. Chef Prigozhin, who prepared all of Putin's meals, can head an organization like Wagner when the time comes. Chef Prigozhin is actually your commander Prigozhin. Prigozhin's initiatives are not limited to this. Prigozhin supplies food to a large part of the Russian army with the catering company he established. This may be an important indicator to understand the power relations in Russia. A career that started as Putin's chef can lead to being the boss of a giant army and companies. Provided, of course, that you rise as high as Putin allows. Wagner's first appearance on the stage came after Russia illegally annexed Crimea. In the 2014 war, pro-Russian separatists formed militia battalions to fight the Ukrainian army. In the following period, many of these soldiers formed the basis of Wagner. The soldiers gathered under the umbrella of Wagner later became mercenaries for Russia. From 2014 to 2015, the group assisted the separatist forces of the self-proclaimed Donetsk and Luhansk People's Republics and gained worldwide fame during the war in the Ukrainian Donbass. Because the Wagner Group operates in support of Russian interests, receives military equipment from the Russian Ministry of Defense, and uses Russian Ministry of Defense installations for training, it is often considered a de facto unit of the Russian military or Russia's military intelligence agency. In fact, an examination of their work shows that this assumption has a high degree of accuracy. The real use of Wagner is as a front organization to avoid legal responsibility. If Russia has actually entered or is going to enter somewhere, it can easily do illegal things by using Wagner. The Moscow administration, which wants to avoid criminal responsibility and attention, can use Wagner for this purpose. It is widely known that Russia uses Wagner to hide the number of casualties and the financial costs of its foreign interventions from the public. Wagner played an important role in Russia's invasion of Ukraine in 2022. Among other activities in Ukraine, he was reportedly deployed to assassinate Ukrainian leaders and widely recruited prisoners and convicts for frontline combat. In December 2022, John Kirby of the Pentagon announced that the Wagner Group had 50,000 fighters in Ukraine, including 10,000 mercenaries and 40,000 convicts. There was some uncertainty about Wagner's legal status. Statements from Moscow stated that there was no relationship between the state and Wagner in any way. The legal status of private military companies in Russia is ambiguous. On the one hand, Russian legislation explicitly prohibits illegal armed formations and mercenary groups, but at the same time the Russian state does not prosecute the many private military companies operating in Russia, including but not limited to Wagner, which employ Russians. The Wagner Group has fought many battles on behalf of Russia, particularly in the ongoing war in Ukraine, and has lost many members. Russia was known to have supply and logistics shortages throughout the war. After the Wagner Group suffered great losses, Wagner leader Prigozhin made statements reacting to Moscow. Prigozhin's statements clearly threatened the Kremlin. After the relations between the Kremlin and Wagner became tense, the Wagner Group made an incredible move. Perhaps this move was the beginning of the end for Wagner. On June 23, 2023, Wagner leader Prigozhin made a statement. He said that 2,000 Wagner militiamen had lost their lives in Russian rocket attacks, and in response to this, he announced a revenge attack on Moscow for justice and to stop the evil of the Russian military high command. Claiming that 25,000 Wagner militiamen were ready, Prigozhin said that the Wagner militia had crossed into Russia from Rostov and were ready to go to the end. Prigozhin also claimed that Shoigu fled from Rostov. But Wagner's rebellion lasted one day. On June 24, 2023, Wagner's mutiny ended and the members returned to their bases. This was the breaking point for Wagner and Prigozhin. As a result of negotiations between Wagner leader Prigozhin and Moscow, it was agreed that Wagner would withdraw from the war zone. Wagner troops were deployed outside the border. Harsh sanctions and measures were taken against Wagner. As a result, Wagner became defunct and resumed its operations in Africa. Wagner's leader Prigozhin also died under suspicious circumstances on his return from a trip to Africa. Russian state media announced that his name was on the passenger list of the plane that crashed in the Tver region of Russia on August 23, 2023, killing all 10 people on board. On board the plane were the commanders and leader of the Wagner Group, Prigozhin. Details of the plane crash have not been made public. It remains unknown whether Prigozhin's death was an accident or an assassination. In Russia, anyone who opposes the system and authority either disappears or dies under suspicious circumstances. Even if Prigozhin had survived the plane crash, he probably would have fallen from a high-rise building. So in all probability his life would have been taken away from him because in Russia there is no room for error. Anyone who makes a mistake pays with his life. This is how Wagner's story can be briefly summarized. After Prigozhin, Wagner, which was left unattended after Prigozhin, entered a process of disintegration and lost its former effectiveness. Russia is using prisoners, fugitives and migrants in its ongoing war with Ukraine. What do you think about the Wagner Group? How do you think Russia's relationship with Wagner can be interpreted? What do you think about the relations between Prigozhin and Putin? We value your opinions. If you want to see more content like this, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and share your opinion in the comments.